From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Car Night Show starring Nolan. Inviting you to join Nolan as guest this week, Kevin McNamara to the show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Nolan Car Night Show, which is, great for especially the time of day that this is being recorded. But with me this week is a special guest, one of the best in Rhode Island in terms of sports journalism. He's the one and only Kevin McNamara. How are you doing this week, Kevin?
I'm doing good, Nolan. How you doing?
We're making it through. Hopefully this all ends very soon, but with what's going on now with recent reports, it's not looking too good, but we do our best. So things like this definitely help ease that time, especially the last 2 years. As I like to do with all my guests, I like to catch up with how they're doing during these interesting times. So how's life for yourself?
Good. It's been, well, if we go back over 2 years, it's been really crazy. Obviously, the sports world turned upside down in March of 2020. Since then, I've left a longtime employer at the Providence Journal and transitioned into the, a little bit of your world. I'm a podcast guy. I have a sports radio show on WPRO and launched a sports website. So I've been more of an entrepreneur through the pandemic, which is a challenge, but it's been fun as well.
What's that been like for you for this sort of new zone in life that you're into with your podcast and radio show and then the website? I don't want to say necessarily starting from ground zero, but in a sense you're building up from that point.
Yeah, certainly a transition. The sports media world is challenged from the very top to the very bottom. Everyone really was thrown by the pandemic. That's number one. But even before then, the sports, I'd say the sports fan, consumer. It's interesting the way people get their sports news now, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for. I think that's changing almost every, 6 months, certainly every year. Some things are hot, some things are not, whether it's, podcasts or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook Live, and then the traditional, newspapers, radio, and television. So, during this time, I decided to kind of repackage myself a little bit, kind of work on the brand. I've been in the market for over 30 years, so there is a following there. It's a big college basketball state. That's really is my bread and butter. And, it's been interesting so far. I'd say it's a work in progress, but it's been fun. It's still the work that I like, but it is an interesting business.
For you in this zone that you're in with the stuff I just mentioned, and obviously, you're known for, your writing and whatnot, but how important to you in this section that you have to, make sure that you're keeping yourself accountable with presenting this form of media with yourself?
Yeah, well, I'd say two things. I think there's a big difference between writing for a living. So again, kevinmacsports.com is my website. That's where all my writing is now. That's a 95% subscription only service, kind of like a newspaper. Most newspapers now have paywalls and whatnot. I think I've learned over, again, 30 years in that business, how to be accountable. I'm a one-man shop. I do have some people that I consult with all the time for, certain copy editing and whatnot. But I kind of know the deal. Now, since last January, I've had this radio show on WPRO. That's very different. You really do have to watch what you say. It's not a caller-driven show. It's more of a sports news show. And that's been an adjustment, but I think it's information. It's informative. It's fast-paced, and we try to keep it fun as well.
Now with this, and I'm sure that it helps you in some sense with the other stuff. But what I want to kind of talk about next is sort of how I said before we got going, point A when you first got going. Now, how much to you was sports journalism in your life and important to you? Because there are a lot of people out in this world where they say, oh yeah, I knew since I was a kid when I was 6 years old that I wanted to do this, and this has been such a big part. And I was with my grandpa watching the news. So was sports journalism for you a big role when you were growing up?
It was. I started writing for the Warwick Beacon was the paper that I first started writing for. I was in high school at the time and would do some American Legion summer games for my friend Tim Geary. who's the sports editor at the time. He went on to have a long career out in Fall River. So I kind of dabbled in it a little bit. I was a voracious reader. I would read the Providence Journal every day, I shouldn't say cover to cover, but the sports cover to cover, to the point where one of my best pals was the paper boy, and I made sure I got the paper as soon as I get off the bus. It was the evening journal. And I said, Michael, you don't have to deliver ours, just give it to me now. So yes, a heavy reader through high school and whatnot. Then when I went to college, I'd say it crystallized exactly what I wanted to do once I got to college.
Now, schools like URI and other schools, across the country, URI is not the only one, but they've really, I want to say, developed and improved and grown in their sports media, sports journalism fields, and what they're able to provide for kids and their stations and whatnot. How much leadway or assistance, or what was it like for you going to college? Because I'm sure the technology that we have, that the students are able to use today, wasn't necessarily available when you were in school.
Yeah, for sure. So I went to Syracuse, and my freshman year was 1984, 85, well before you were born, Nolan. But it was called the Newhouse School, named after a kind of famous and very wealthy newspaper family. And it was Newhouse 1. When I was a freshman, they opened Newhouse 2 to kind of give kids in the television radio field more hands-on experience with, basically they created a television studio, in Newhouse 2. I think there's now Newhouse 4. So it just shows the difference and the scope of our business and how it's changed so much. And if you're going to do it the right way, you have to give kids hand-on experience. You can always say, hey, go cover the South Kingstown Town Council and come back and write a story, or come back and do a stand-up on it. That's fine, but to learn the technology that's always changing, and just think about, again, what's available in our business now. If you don't have that hand-on experience, that's really what I think students today are looking for.
Now, as we mentioned, think times have changed, but for you going through those, experiences in college, did that sort of help you make sure that you were on top of your game back then? Because I think nowadays students may necessarily just rely more on technology to, assist them in certain areas.
Yeah, we can all, again, get in Newhouse 4 or whatever you guys have at the Harrington School and learn how to, operate a camera or edit a radio or TV package. If you don't know how to write, you can't be in this business. So I would say when I was in school, they literally said just kind of what I said about South Kingstown. They said, go up to Janesville, DeWitt, and cover a city hall meeting. Go to the Carrier Dome and write about, the Syracuse Pitt game. That type of practical experience is just that's the business. That's what you need to know how to do. And I would say when I went to school, I was really into maybe, public relations, maybe sports information. And then I saw, the journalists come in and cover, Syracuse athletics. Football was really successful when I was there. Basketball was great in the top 10, went to the Final Four, etc. And I was like, I think I like what those guys do better. Yeah. So I kind of shifted my focus to sports writing. And by the time I graduated, I not only worked for the school paper, but I worked for the city paper, the Syracuse Post-Standard, did some freelance writing for them, and also the Associated Press. I would drive down to Cornell and cover some games down in Ithaca as well. So again, that practical experience is I think really what it's all about.
Now, obviously, the Providence Journal. How at what point when you were in college did that come along, or was it after college when you started working for the Providence Journal?
Yeah, I had an internship between my junior and senior year in college. Basically covered the Pawtucket Red Sox. That was the summer job. It was great. It was just great practical experience for 2 months or whatever it was that summer of '87. And graduated without a job. I had interviewed a few places around the country, and then something popped at the Journal, and I was hired in the August after I graduated from college.
Now, I've mentioned or I've said this before to other people, and I've asked this. Going from college and working maybe for your college radio station or news station or paper, whatever, and talking about the adjustment from that to then being professional doing that. What for you? I know you mentioned that you were reading it constantly when you were a kid, and the entire sports section. For you, was it an easy transition from student to professional in that field, or was it something you sort of had to learn as you go to adapt to?
I wouldn't say easy, but it's I'd say the Providence Journal then was a very corporate place. At that time, the Journal had bureaus around the state, like a lot of them, like maybe 8.
Oh, wow.
I think the first bureau. So I was not in downtown Providence at the office. The first bureau I was at, I think, was in Smithfield, Rhode Island, and then we had another one in Johnston, Rhode Island, and then I think I also did some time in Pawtucket. Downtown Pawtucket. So they had these little satellite offices. So you met an array of people, most of them news people, but they would always try to have a sports person in most of the bureaus. And again, I hopped around to be the sports person, mainly covered high school sports in those areas. So you get to meet an awful lot of people. And I would say the transition from college, just to be a professional, work with people who are, I'm 21 and they're 36 or 57. That was the adjustment more than the work. The work, I knew I could, handle the workload.
And that's sort of something I want to talk about briefly, not age, but, I would think when you're starting out, some people may not take you necessarily as serious as someone who maybe has been in the business for 20, 25, 30 years. For you, once you were gaining experience in years and your name became well known with people around the area and reading the papers, how was that for you to be able to finally have that availability where people are like, okay, we can take him serious and allow him to do certain stories and whatnot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's just a natural progress. In that era anyways, the Providence Journal was a big deal. It really was. The circulation then would be pushing 200,000, 250,000 on the weekends. I covered some high profile stuff. So I think when people, you'd call people on the phone, they'd call you right back. It was just a different era. And I think in the newspaper world anyway, it's similar to TV. If people read you or if people see you, they either think you're good, you're not good. You treat them fairly, you treat them well. They'll come back for more. And, as the years pile up and the stories pile up, you just build credibility.
Yeah. Now, for you, obviously, for covering the Providence College men's basketball team, what's that like for you? Not just in general doing it, the years you spent doing it, but also doing it continue to come back doing it year after year.
Well, it's interesting. So I, again, went to school at a Big East school. Syracuse was obviously in the Big East then. So my dream would be to keep covering college basketball and keep covering the Big East because it's what you know best. It's what you grew up with, etc. And again, when I started at the Journal, I was covering high school sports. And within a couple of years, it was I covered URI basketball for a season. And the following season, the Providence beat writer actually was asked to cover some politics, and he was really good at it. Ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize. His name is Mike Stanton, who's now a teacher at the University of Connecticut. So he leaves that beat. They asked me to jump into the Providence beat. I'm young. I'm only 23 or whatever it is. And it was perfect. It's exactly what I wanted to do. Over the years, I get asked to cover the Patriots, so I would have to leave college basketball. Patriots, I'd say at least 3 times. The Red Sox on a full-time basis. I wanted no part of that. So my choice really, I won the battles with the boss back and forth to continue doing what I was doing. I was just happy with what I was doing. Resisted some offers to leave Providence. My wife is from Rhode Island. My family majority is from Rhode Island. So it just fit. So I think that's more of a lifestyle thing than anything else. And again, the years piled up and I've covered Providence basketball for over 30 years.
I don't want to use the word fun necessarily, but for you, does it become any sense of more enjoyable as the years go on? Is it something for you just like, you've been doing it for this amount of time and it's, you're just so used to it?
You broke up a little bit there. You mean covering just sports in Rhode Island, or that beat specifically, or
that specifically covering PC? Because I don't want to use the word fun necessarily, but I'm sure
yeah.
there had to be.
No,
some
I mean it's work. I'd say the fun part is that you just have so many great friends. A lot of my friends are basketball people, former coaches, former writers, some TV people. When I go on the road now, everyone knows who I am. If I go to the Big East tournament, I just know everybody. I've been around, long or longer than most people. So, I think that's a positive. You could take some editors, I'd say, would take the approach of, moving their reporters around certain beats every 3-4 years just to, have a fresh take on it, whatnot. And I understand that positive, but I also understand being, tried and true, you really know the beat, you really know the connections. I have a, Rolodex in college basketball that's really good. And I think there's a value in that as well.
Now, for you, seeing as though, and it was, we talked about, covering this team for a while, I would think you would have a sort of relationship with not just the players over the years, but the coaches as well. And and I'm sure that's the case for other players. But for you, what's that sense of security like with Coach Cooley, who's currently the coach, to know that you're covering the team fairly and whatnot, and that he can sort of trust in what you're gonna provide to him?
Yeah, that comes over time, Nolan. I'm fortunate the vast majority of the coaches that have been at Providence while I've been in the market have been very good to me. There was a time where I would talk to the coach at Providence, at least 3 days a week, sometimes 4 days a week, just because there's 2 games a week. You talk to them before the game, after the game. So needless to say, you're gonna develop a relationship with the person. I wouldn't say friendship. Sometimes it is friendship. Sometimes it's it's contentious. I would say I've gotten, barked at by every coach at Providence. So there's no question about that after something I wrote. There's just there's no avoiding it. That said, they all have taken my calls. Now, Ed Cooley's a unique situation because I've known Ed since he was in basically his first job. I think his first Division I job was an assistant at URI, and it was probably, it might be 28 years ago. So I've just known the guy a long time before he got the job at Providence. So there was a pre-existing relationship there. And, I'm thrilled for Ed. I think he's had great success at Providence. I think his story is really, really unique, being a local guy, a minority guy from the city of Providence. And he's had success, and success makes everybody, everyone's in a better mood with a winning team.
Exactly, which is what I want to piggyback on next. Although you cover the my team's enemy, PC, I have an opinion on URI and their programs, but also you have a opinion and stance on things. But for you, do you have any takeaways so far in what the URI program, not just the men's but women's, has done so far, and what does the men's program have to do to not repeat last year?
Yeah, well, I think the URI program is almost still in transition from Dan Hurley. And I know that sounds strange because David Cox has been in place for a while now. But if you think about the two players who transferred from URI, Toppin, who went to Kentucky, and Tyrese Martin, who left to go to Connecticut, you put those two guys on the URI team right now, I think they can play with everybody in the Atlantic 10. And then Fats Russell also leaves and goes to Maryland. Those three guys might be 3 of the 5, or certainly 10 best players in the Atlantic 10, no question. It's hard to replace all league players. Those are all league type talents. I think David has done a good job. His staff has done a good job with bringing in transfers. It's hard to get transfers who are impactful up and down your lineup. So I think the program is still in transition. It's a recruiting situation. I think their talent is good, but it's probably not top 4 or 5 good in the Atlantic 10. But we'll see. I think David's a good coach. And I think his teams play very hard. But, talent is what wins in college basketball. And they lost some serious talent in those 3 players.
For you covering sports, and I'm sure you've seen your fair share of college athletes, but when you or I went through that whole charade of losing players, transferring to other schools, then people who were transferring to their schools were leaving or decommitting. How do you assess, how did you assess that at the time when that was all happening for them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't call it a charade. It's very popular. It's just the way of the world around college basketball. Providence, I think there's really only two guys who were recruited as 4-year players who are a factor up there. That'd be Nate Watson and AJ Reeves. It's just the way it is. You need to be a good recruiter of high school players, try to develop some guys and keep them around, but maybe more so at a place like URI, you need to be a good recruiter of transfers. Your incoming players need to be as good or better than the guys who leave. And guess what? The guys who leave, they're probably going to better places. Exactly. A Kentucky, a UConn, a Maryland. Now they've lost a few other guys, to lower programs as well. But it's constant and it's going to be plentiful. I'm not in favor of it at all. I think there's an awful lot to gain for kids to sit out that 1 year if they want to transfer. Academically, it's going to help them big time. I can't wait till I see the NCAA stats in a couple of years and find out how all these transfers. First of all, there's a lot of kids who go in the transfer portal and don't find another school.
Yeah.
And people don't talk about that. I mean, that's like devastating that exactly. You're on full scholarship at URI, you want to leave and go somewhere else, and all of a sudden you have nowhere to go. I mean, that's disastrous. But I want to know what the graduation rates of these transfers are in a couple of years when the NCAA can take stock of that.
Does that sort of speak to, and I don't know exactly the numbers or statistics for PC, but does that sort of speak to the level that PC's at in terms of retaining players and how they're not necessarily been in the news for something as crazy what happened to URI?
No, again, look at the roster. Last year they lost 3 players to transfer, Providence. Baylor. Okay, Baylor won the national championship. They're ranked number 1 in the country today. If they couldn't have taken transfers, they wouldn't be in the top 10. I mean, right. It's the entire, and it's you should see it in football. We don't have big time football in New England, but it's all the talk down south is who's going in the portal. Can we get a big time quarterback out of the portal? It's just that the rules changed, the game's changed, and transferring and recruiting transferring is if it's not number 1, it's number 1A. Most important thing coaches have to monitor.
Now, one of the last 2 questions I want to ask before the one-word challenge and let you get on your way. Over your time, and as you mentioned earlier, we talked about earlier, relationships in this field and over time and being people taking you more seriously. There's one person that you sort of have, or I should say still have a close or a relationship with, and that's Bill Reynolds. What was that like for you to experience working so closely with him over the years, and did his work sort of come on into yours?
Yeah, I mean, he's a very close friend, mentor, buddy. Spent so much quality time with him, not only in the office but at games. Or Bill's not a big driver; he doesn't like to drive. So I would always say it's driving Miss Daisy. He'd jump in the car and we'd go to UConn or go to Boston for so many. Whether it's the Celtics or the Red Sox or Boston College, it was great. It was, he'd tell great stories. He had great connections. He would introduce me to people who would become, sources and connections of myself over the years. It's how, the world of work is supposed to work. Forget about sports. If you're in insurance, if you're in banking, you have someone who's 20 years older than you. You have lunch with them 3 days a week. They take you under your wing and you learn from them. And I learned a ton from Bill and certainly respect his talent. I think he's as talented as anyone that we've had in this market forever. And certainly he's a close friend.
Now, you've covered a lot in sports, college, and also, professional stuff. Is there one thing that you hope to, before you retire, whenever that is, that you would like to at least try to cover before all said and done?
Try to cover. I hate to, gloat here, but I've covered the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Final Four, the Ryder Cup, the NHL Stanley Cup. Not really. I've kind of done it all. I've been to Augusta National. I'm a huge golfer. I've been to Augusta National, never covered the tournament. So how about we say that? Cover Augusta.
I was gonna say it because I know through your Twitter feed that you're a big golfer. So I was thinking maybe that would be after eliminating the other ones. Now, before we leave, this is a segment I like to call the one word challenge. Now, for those out there who don't know what it is, this is when myself, the host, talks to the guest and he throws out a few topics that have some sort of connection to them, and he has to do his best to say something that comes to his mind when he thinks of them. So, Kevin, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Syracuse.
The best. So much fun.
PC basketball.
It's a Rhode Island institution.
Rick Pitino.
Heck of a coach. Hall of Famer.
The Providence Journal.
A lot of great memories and great people.
Sports media.
Convoluted, competitive, entertaining.
Kevin McNamara.
Hopefully a nice person and someone who people are going to keep listening to or reading for the next, as long as I want to keep doing it.
Well, I certainly I will agree with the first part. Definitely. Kevin, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy week and day to come on and do this for me. It means a lot.
Nolan, happy to help. Best of luck at URI. Best of luck to your dad, an all-time great
Yes.
tennis coach down there in South Kingstown. Now, can I ask you some questions? Is that allowed?
Certainly. Go ahead.
Were you a good tennis player?
I will say I am decent. I am not at the same level as he is, or when my grandfather, who coached at CCRI nationally and all that fun jazz. I was the person who obviously had the ability to be great and be a great player and be remembered as such, but I never took advantage of that because I was more of a lazy player in high school and was one of the person who'd be like, well, I should be at that spot. Because when I played in high school, my senior year, there was a kid who played fourth singles. I don't want to say choke the bed, but we counted on that position in high school because that's where our talent starts to come over the other schools, and I should have played in that position. I could come in more clutch, and I just never did. And I'd always say, oh, I should be there, and always get all PO'd and whatnot.
Okay. And the other question is, where'd you get the USA Olympic flag?
Oh, I got that at Amazon. A lot of my room is a dark blue color, and there's not a whole lot on the wall. So I said, I might as well add a few things, and I've rearranged my room so it sort of makes it look better in the background. Not as official as your green screen, but yeah. That's what I do. Before we end here quickly, is there anything that you'd like to plug? Which I'm sure there is some stuff.
Yeah, so it's funny, the show's been going for almost 10 months, and people always say, so what do you do now? Well, I'm the host of the Kevin Mack Sports Hour on WPRO, 6 to 7, Monday through Friday. Tune in, tell your friends, whether you're in the car or cooking dinner. Everyone sees that's a strange time. It's not a strange time. 6 to 7, tune in. We look at, sports around New England and here in Rhode Island, more importantly. And Kevin Mack, MC, kevinmacksports.com. I can't tell you how many people say, geez, I missed you. I miss your writing. I'm still writing. Come on by, check it out, and subscribe. It's very cheap, much cheaper than where I used to work.
Well, in that line of phrasing, subscribe on YouTube, follow on all the audio platforms, leave a like, comment, all that subscribe stuff. So then down the road, 10 years from now, whatever it is, and this becomes as big as Joe Rogan or any of the big time players, you're going to look back on this episode and be like, holy cow, this was amazing. I'm glad I subscribed back then. If you want more news and updates on the podcast, follow on Twitter at Nolan Carr at Night and Instagram Nolan Carr at Night Show. And in the words of Johnny Carson, I bid you all a heartfelt good night.